The race to become the next Federal Reserve chair could be approaching the finish line this week. Maybe. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says President Trump is expected to announce his choice any day now, as reports say the odds BlackRock's Rick Rieder lands the job have shot up recently. Rieder has been on the short list of candidates, which include former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, current Fed Governor Christopher Waller, and National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. But the Wall Street Journal's top Fed reporter says one of these men is in a catch-22 position of sorts that may come to a make-or-break climax when the Fed meeting culminates Wednesday afternoon. Nick Timiraos, Wall Street Journal chief economics correspondent, is here to unspool this situation. Okay, Nick, first off, who are you talking about and what's the catch-22?
Well, the issue is watch how Governor Chris Waller votes at the FOMC meeting this week. He is in the running for Fed chair, of course, and President Trump has said he won't pick anybody who doesn't agree with his preference for lower rates. So Waller arguably faces a difficult choice here. You can vote to cut and signal alignment with President Trump, which would help your candidacy. Admittedly, he's kind of a dark horse here. Or he could vote with the majority to hold interest rates steady. That is what's widely expected for this meeting. That would burnish his credentials as an independent thinker or a straight shooter, but it could cost him, whatever long odds he already has as he tries to get this job.
And he wants it. It feels like they all do, I would imagine. But so what you're talking about here is he is the one current voter who is in the running. And therefore,
that's right.
If he votes to cut rates this time around, and by the way, it looks like there is no way, at least according to the Fed Funds futures, that we will see a cut on Wednesday. If he votes for that, he gains the president's, I guess, fairy dust. He certainly would like it. But if he votes against it, he gets Wall Street cred, he gets bond vigilante cred. So what happens? I mean, do you know who the president might be leaning toward right now?
Well, I don't. And the reason I don't is because the president has said he wants different things. He wants somebody who is loyal to him. I mean, he spoke in Davos last week, and he revealed, I think, Liz, his core anxiety, which was, he said, you put somebody in this job who tells you what you want to hear, in this case, that I'm going to cut interest rates, but then once they're there, they kind of get to be their own man. And so that's the issue here. And of those four candidates you put up, two of them are distinctly outsiders who don't really have much of a relationship at all with the president. That's Chris Waller and Rick Rieder, the BlackRock executive. And then the two who do know Trump better, Kevin Warsh, who was passed over for the job 8 years ago, but has maintained a good relationship with the president. And then, of course, Kevin Hassett works in the White House. So those are the two that had been the early focus of the betting markets because, well, they probably check the loyalty box better.
What do you think it will take to get the Fed cutting once again? Because we've gotten some good data. We just got durable goods numbers, which surprised to the upside. These are purchases of big ticket items, and it's a really nice number here. And not to mention that aside from the labor market, which is looking slightly iffy, everything else seems to be very solid, especially the consumer. So what do you think you'd have to see to get all of the Fed voters on the same boat?
That's a great question. Keep in mind first, Liz, the three cuts that they did at the end of last year, each one got more difficult to push through the committee. So Jay Powell really had to twist arms, especially for the December cut. And so there isn't a lot of interest to do that again, unless you see either that inflation is making convincing progress back down to 2%. It was sort of moving sideways last year. Some people want to throw out tariff effects and say it's actually better than it looks. Other people say, well, the number's got to be the number. You don't get to throw things out. So you either need to see progress resuming on inflation, or you have to see something kind of scary in the labor market, the unemployment rate going up, concerns around the labor market were what got the Fed to cut in September, October, and December to begin with. So you need one of those two things to happen. And it's not clear you really can get the evidence on inflation for several more months. So you're either going to get cuts sooner, because the labor market's not looking all that healthy. Or maybe by the middle of the year, it looks like the sun is out on inflation, the clouds have parted, and the Fed can do the last few cuts that would get them down to neutral.
Nick, Wednesday, during the news conference, after the announcement of where rates stand, you're going to be in that room. I'm not going to ask you what your question is going to be because I'm sure it's in a state of flux right now, but this will be the first time that Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell will be appearing before reporters since President Trump slapped the DOJ, the Trump administration Department of Justice, slapped a criminal investigation on not just the Federal Reserve, but on Jay Powell specifically, allegedly over cost overruns of the renovation of the Federal Reserve headquarters. I mean, is everybody going to be asking about that? It just seems like this is going to be quite the news conference.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of questions about the political drama because this is unprecedented. But I also sometimes weigh, as I think about what I'm going to ask, well, what's he going to answer? Because you kind of want to get some fulsome response. You want to understand what the Fed is doing, thinking about, and he tends to not offer a whole lot when he's asked about the political dramas around the Fed. So if I can come up with a really sharply scoped question there, I wouldn't hesitate to ask it. But you almost wonder if you're wasting your shot when you ask about things that the chair just sort of turns aside and says, I'm not going to talk about that today.
Right, because it's an ongoing investigation. And on top of it, he will do exactly that because he's prepared for that. Nick, so in the end, who do you think is going to get the job? Who will get the nod to run the Federal Reserve once Jay Powell steps down?
You have to ask the question, Liz, but I'm not in the business of betting or forecasting. I just try to write what's happening. I think if you go on what the president has been saying, he really wants somebody he knows well on the job. That's Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Now, of course, Bessent and Trump have both said they're not going to pull Bessent out of the Treasury and put him at the Fed. So then I think it really gets to the question of who has been able to use this interview process to build a strong relationship with the president. He does not want to pick what he regards as a mistake in Jay Powell. He's very upset that he picked Powell. So I think it really comes down to who does he feel like he can trust and which candidate did the best job of connecting with him in those interviews.
I don't know. We sit around, we talk about it here because we're nerds, and I'm sure you guys at the Journal do the same thing, but we may know sometime this week. Who knows? Nick, it's good to see you. Thank you so much, and we'll watch for your question on Wednesday during this hour,
Thanks
by the way,
me.
folks. Claman Countdown will have complete coverage of the FOMC interest rate setting decision on Wednesday. The announcement's 2 p.m. Eastern, but the news conference where everybody, including Edward Lawrence from Fox Business, is going to be right in there asking questions. That happens during our hour, so don't miss it.